Good evening and welcome to this edition of DeFacto Review with Jargal DeFacto and myself Aruna, bringing you a weekly edition of news that are shaping Mongolia. We are live on Facebook at V Television. You can also follow us on Twitter, #Jargal_DeFacto. Coming up on the program. Mongolia's inflation rate is 7.2%. What are the reasons behind this inflation? We will discuss on the program. The price of education in Mongolia. Mongolian students expect fair value for their payment. Full explanation on the case of Mr. VEYSEL AKCAY is needed to save the relations between Mongolia and Turkey. Let's start our discussion with what is inflation. Mongol Bank's current policy is to limit the inflation rate at 8%. How realistic is this target now?
Yes, it is. The target is 8%, but today is at the level of 7.2%. What is the inflation? Inflation is we had a traditional food, huita, in 1990 at the cost of 6 tugruk. And that time the average salary was about 500 tugruk. After 28 years now, this food, huita, is 12,000 tugruk, and average salary is 900,000 tugruk. So huita had increased in the price 2,000 times, and the average salary 1,800 times. They say it is not like, say, today's 7.2% is good, but not that good, because optimal rate is around 2%. Of course, it is compared with Venezuela, which this year reaches 1,000% inflation rate, is different matter. So that's why it's very important to measure the inflation, and it is done by several indexes around the world. One of the most popular one is this CPI, Consumer Price Index, and also some countries use so-called Manufacturer Price Index, which also shows the change in prices. Mongolia keep using the CPI based on the major goods what we consume, and our consumer goods basket is consisting of 344 goods and services, and Mongolia has changed that basket composition in 2010, in 2015, because the way people use the goods keep constantly changing. So that's why we have changed this inflation. But however, Mongolia is to use more also manufacturer price index, and central bank target is not to be only inflation, which is at 8%, but maybe like the US and other countries, maybe unemployment rate is to be also target, so that economy grows normally. At the end, with any inflation, we want to see inflation growing normally, which means why the 2% of inflation rate is optimal, because under this 2%, it's normal stock market growing, and consumers expanding is growing. And in that level, at the level of 2%, the economy is regarded healthy. But it's beyond 10%, then it is already some questions. So that's why it's important, and I hope we will keep it.
So what are the major goods that are consumed by an average Mongolian family? And what is the impact on this inflation?
Yeah, as I said, this basket is consisting of 344 goods. And from them, the particular 5 major consuming goods and services are taken. And those 5 have the most important role, but also this Statistics Committee survey shows that 72% of this 50 major consuming goods are goods imported. But actually, the major goods, including Mongolia, very, very simple foods like meat, flour, and rice, sugar, this sort of prices are mostly playing in a role. Though this time 7.2% is also influenced by these goods, but not very substantially. Relatively, compared to the economy, 7.2% is acceptable because inflation rate not only depends on the prices, but also a lot depends on the whether the state budget has deficit or not. Mongolia, where we have a state deficit, budget deficit, it's very hard to keep inflation because there are only two ways to cover inflation. One, you increase tax. The other, you print more money. And well, Mongolians keep increasing taxes, but not that enough to cover all costs. So that's why the printing is happening, but at the modest level. But if they do more, that's the concern. Anyway, inflation, in particular, beyond 2% is no good. Beyond 10% is unacceptable.
So, as you say, increased taxes and increased printing of money these are two reasons behind inflation in Mongolia at the present. Are there any other reasons for the inflation?
As I said, these inflation are caused mostly supply and demand. Mostly according to Mongolian Statistics Committee, this inflation is caused from the cost increase of production of goods and services, particularly those important goods like, as I said, the several products I have just mentioned. And also very important factor is the logistics cost, fuel cost, and exchange rate fluctuation, and how much we are importing at which cost. Those are major factors impacting on the way how prices are established in the country. But I should say that, for example, food price is controlled by the state through the changing excise taxes, usually imposed on the goods that harm ecology or people's health, including this food. And as a result, food now keep increasing, and the government, because they have decreased their taxes revenue is now here crying. They are missing that amount of some 50 billion plus Tugruk have in not supplying. So this is one part of inflation. And the other thing is, usually we have talked a bit about the state budget. And the state budget, we talked about also 2% of optimal rate, right? Yes. This one is, it depends on how big the size of government in your gross domestic product. In Mongolia, gross domestic product inside the state purchasing, procurement. Government procurement takes about 30%, which is measured by the budget expenses. And this is the way how the government play a role. Budget procurement, it also includes the salary they pay to public officers, all what the government is contributing to economy through buying other things, to government projects, government infrastructure, etc. In a developed country, that public government participation in this state is around 17 to 20%. In developing countries, it could be a little bit more, but not twice more as we experience in Mongolia. Why? Because state property, when it increases, in particular businesses increases, as any state, there's very little self-control here, and they tend to expend more money than they planned or they need. That's unfortunately how the big states governments behave. So it's hard to know for people on the time what they are expending more than enough, more than they earn. And usually you know it later, when already the inflation is caused, made on all their supposedly not so good effects on the economy. So these are, again, government supply of money and government size in the economy, and those are, and also the way how prices are controlled by the government are real reasons beyond inflation.
Are there any urgent actions that the government could take to bring the inflation level down to 2%?
With the current economic situation, with the size of the government, with the power we depend on commodity prices, this 8 level is probably more or less the level that we should not go beyond. But however, for the healthy economy, the inflation is not the only to be target for the central bank, because if like in the US, central bank targets employment level or unemployment level rather, which, for example, in the US to be kept under 6.5%, because the loose economic monetary policy gives more chance for private sector to create jobs. When you have a job, then we have less poverty, we have a better economy. You have a salary, you can have more spending power. So that's why I would rather think Mongolian government, in particular central bank, makes their target also employment level. So with these two measures, control or being a target, we have a more chance to have better economic efficiency.
Okay, let us discuss our second topic about the education sector in Mongolia. In 3 weeks' time, the new school year is going to start, and tuition fees this year in 4 major universities are expected to rise. Many student groups have expressed their discontent with the increase in tuition. What do you think? Do Mongolian students get the same value out of our education system as they put in?
Very not easy questions. We talk about now increase of tuition fee for universities in the state universities, which are total. We have 18 state-owned schools, higher educational institutions, out of total 96 universities and institutions. From 96, we have 18 state-owned institutions, and total 155,000 students study in those institutions, out of which about 90,000 belong to the state-owned institutions. And also we should say there is 8,100 teachers are working in the state-owned institutions. So when we talk about this tuition fee increases, we also talk about not only students, but also these teachers who are supposedly to provide higher quality education that makes the students meeting the needs of business, private sector. Yes, indeed, in 3 weeks they will start new academic year, but this issue is really the another increase of the tuition fee, of course, getting big resistance from the students, which demands fair value for the money, as you said, for their payment. If you take a total bigger picture, it's an issue of financing of higher education in Mongolia. And because state-owned big chunk in higher education, partially they just pay, we call it permanent costs, or the changing costs, right? Fixed costs and costs, current costs, fixed costs and current costs. These two mixed type of financing causes more problems, because, for example, last year, 2017, for the fixed cost of state-owned enterprises, the schools asked 21 billion tugriks. But actually they got 2.1 billion tugriks, actually, according to an official, Mrs. Amarjargalan, Mr. or Miss, I don't know, Amar, who is the Higher Education Policy Department head of Ministry of Education, Culture, Science and Sport. So if you you're supposed to have a fixed cost and fixed cost, current cost. The fixed cost to be have, if fixed cost is cut 10 times, then they have to take money from this part, which of course drives them to increase their tuition fee. Unfortunately. So now question is coming, either government pays all or they privatize the schools. Because you see, the experience of Scandinavian countries, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, even Germany, they have free education. Higher education also free. It doesn't mean that everything is free, but it's paid by the state. And they have different priority, different program, so it's different cases. So in our case, when you have confused both, when it depends on politicians for a government, then things are happening like this. In particular, you know, higher education and healthcare, hospitals, are most politicized institutions in Mongolia because after change of the government, the ministry is spending, I don't know, half a year. And on the average, they are in cabinet 1.5 years. But out of this 1.5 years, almost 1 year they spend for replacing the heads of the schools or hospitals in Mongolia. It's very unproductive. It's very really monkey business. As a result, what is happening is, because there's so much political, Minister of Finance even sometimes don't provide the expenses needed for that fixed capital, fixed cost. A fixed cost is those costs coming for the schools, whether it works or not, keeping the schools in normal conditions, heating, lighting, or maybe janitors work. All this money, if then they're cut, they have to increase tuition fee.
What does education management spend tuition income on in Mongolia? You've mentioned that the Ministry of Education asked for 21 billion tuliks but received 2.1. Why is that there's such a big discrepancy? Is it because it was miscalculated, or?
No, it is mostly because irresponsibility of the Mongolian government. When on one side they promise to do something, the other side say we don't have the money. Well, question is coming, why they don't have the money? Because they're spending more than planning, and doing some things that is not planned in the budget, and very fragmented state-owned state investments happening in Mongolia. So you don't see the economic efficiency immediately. If it's major highway, major railroad, this is one issue. But you are fragmented, invested. This country is small anyway. And your small available investment are done in all around every corner, the result is less. So it is also the government issue. That's why they are cut 10 times. And then also it's very short-sighted view on education, mostly from political perspective. Yet this is so important economic factor, the higher education, because when people have a higher education, its public goods are increased. Statistics say that we have less criminals with those who has higher education, more responsible actions toward their health care, more responsible action towards taking responsibility for social and public goods. So higher education is a public wealth. And this higher education is, of course, consisting, like in the US, we studied it there, it's consisting of fee, which is kind of our fixed cost, and the other is tuition, which depends on the credit hours you are taking, right? So we have options to select. And good thing is 2011, State University of Mongolia made new regulations. The board of these institutions have approving the change in tuition fee. If they approve, they will increase, they will increase. That's what's happening now. They will increase. There is also a third. They're supposed to be the third source of income other than fee and tuition. which could be endowment. University endowment is a good source of money from those who maybe graduate from that school, donating money to their fund, and those who have donated to your university money is to be somehow rewarded, maybe through exemption of taxes like any normal other countries do. In Mongolia they have cut it, and they said this is a way of corruption, etc. Now, meanwhile, there are so many other ways of corruption that government close their eyes. And when it comes to university endowment, the largest endowment in the world is Harvard Endowment University, and it is 37 billion US dollar. That is along with Harvard's pension assets, working capital, and non-cash gifts. Altogether is managed by Harvard Management Company. And similar things, and in particular tax exemptions, is to be introduced in Mongolia. Otherwise now what is happening is large companies, in particular commercial banks, give tuition to several selected by themselves students, say 100 students, and it goes like advertisement. It's like endowment is something that you are giving money for, not advertising yourself. It's just giving, and somebody, other people decide what to do with this money, provided that this is the all legal institutions works in Mongolia properly. So instead of having this sort of marketing approach, we need to have this sort of endowment approach. This is the third channel. The fourth channel could be, and it is now, students' loan. In Mongolia, students' loan, they will continue, they say, but also this loan has no interest rate, and they need to pay when they have graduated. But when in a country where the saving rate is 16%, when you talk about loan without interest rate, we talk about state substitution, subsidies of these differences. Why? There is no money, free money in the world. There are only people who think there are free money. So that's why we really have to use this whole 4 channels of financing of higher education institutions like in other countries. But before, we need to really make clear, if it is state-owned enterprise institutions, then the state is to be at least responsible for fixed costs.
Income costs. How can Mongolian universities adopt these successful examples in other countries?
They have tried. We have even law since 2011 that time President Bogdorchav initiated, and they finally made this law with this whole system of financial structure. But unfortunately, it was misused by politicians who wanted to nominate on political party nominees to all state-owned institutions, unfortunately. And unfortunately, with every change of the government, which unfortunately happening every 18 months for the last 20 years, whole things are changing. And people are even now today nominated as a head of the schools. Recently, with medical schools, they have made order that this man who was working the head of this medical school for more than 8 years, now he's replaced by former politicians, MP from the People's Party, and now there are big fights happening. You know, very interesting mouse and cat things happening there. One will run with the key or stamp or close the door, all this funny and tragic or performance things happening in Mongolia, unfortunately. So these are the ways. Just implement the laws. Then you already will be accepting Western universities' way of working.
This is a big topic. I hope we can discuss in the future more on education and health sector.
Yep.
But for time's sake, let's move to our third topic. It's on Mr. VEYSEL AKCAY's case. Mongolian ambassador in Turkey has returned recently due to the abduction case of Mr. VEYSEL AKCAY. Mr. VEYSEL AKCAY has been working as the director of the Turkish-Mongolian school for the past 25 years. What are the news since the abduction?
Well, this name, abduction, is completely refused by the Turkish government. Minister of Foreign Affairs of Turkey, Mr. Speaker there, Mr. Hami Askoy, made a statement in which this FEYSEL terrorist organization has a large presence in Mongolia, posing a danger to the Mongolian national security as well. That's what he said. And also he said that this recent smearing campaign conducted by FETÖ themselves, right, in Mongolia, should be a wake-up call for Mongolian friends, demonstrating the capacity to fabricate lies and to manipulate and influence the public. So that statement says a lot. Very important things. It says this Turkish state had not participated. They've not participated. Mongolian state government said they did not. In particular, Minister of Foreign Affairs said, and its office said that they were the first who made the official statement not to allow this plane to go to take off. And so that means Mongolian state did not know. So now question comes even seriously. Turkish government didn't know, Mongolian government didn't know, then who did know? And why this actually is happening, that somebody at daytime is stolen, kidnapped by force, put into the minibus and taken away for many hours. And at the end, this plane, who stated that they will come with 4 persons, will leave 5 persons, according to the official statement. Now question is even more raising, and that's why the Mongolian police had opened criminal case of abducting a person in Mongolia, and this is being now taken, the file is taken by a prosecutor, I understand, and now Mongolian public demands from the Mongolian prosecutor to make open statement immediately. We don't want to see like the other Mongolian corruption cases where high officials, high office officials being held by anti-corruption agency under so-called investigation for a month. Then that person or they are feeling bad, they are freed, and this sort of it is not that corruption cases where Mongolian two large political parties keeping each other mutually collateral-like. So this is because this Akcay kidnapping is an important case. Mongolian public don't give definition whether this man bad or good. We don't know yet. We don't know, and we are not the person. In Mongolia, if you are not proven by law as criminal, until that you have a innocent. So we don't know what is this. It is not our main aim, but we know that we stopped this kidnapping, and we want to know more explanation from our police about this case.
Turkish embassy has also stated that Turkey never interferes with internal security of other countries, and that they are deeply resentful that this case was presented as an abduction operation. What do you think of this statement?
Well, that's the whole thing. The Turkish government refuses to, they said that they don't accept. It is not true. It is FETÖ own terrorist act. That's what they said. It's very alarming state for us. If they did not, then who did it? That's what we need the questions. Before thinking about anything else, we want to know the truth, why that person is kidnapped.
Does this case pose a large risk in Mongolia-Turkey relations in general?
Yes, that's why we need to know this clarification. We have a right to know what exactly happened, because there is two relations, right? Government relations and people's relations. And peoples of these two countries have a long historic traditions of relationship, and I think the fundamentals are strong, because people can understand each other in any case, better at times than politicians.
Yes.
So we don't care what politicians think, but we do care, because this is the issue of our own safety and security. It's the matter of our democracy. So we respect human rights, and foreigners, Mongolians, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gerald, for your insight. This is all for this edition of DeFacto Review. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Have a good night.